Hello everybody, welcome to our session, What is a Social Enterprise? My name is Lizzie Forrester, and I work for iSE, the Initiative for Social Entrepreneurs. We are a social enterprise development agency based in Glebe in Birmingham. Our aim is to grow the social economy through supporting the startup and development of social enterprises in the city. If you want to find out a bit more about us, then you can go to our website, which is www.i-se.co.uk, and all our contact details and information will be on our website. So our session today is all about what a social enterprise is. There's probably one of these reasons as to why you're here. It might be that you're already doing social enterprise informally, so you're providing social good, you're providing a service, but you are not actually incorporated as a social enterprise. You might want to find out more about how you can create change in your community, in your town or your city. You might want to do more good and align your existing business with a socially conscious movement. You might be an existing charity or a group that would like to income generate and is looking towards social enterprise as a way of doing that, and a way of generating more income for your charity. And also social enterprise is potentially the future of business. It's the direction that a lot of business is going in, and social enterprise is really quite hot on the agenda at the moment and is a topic of discussion. So perhaps you just want to find out more about what it's all about. Hopefully this session will help you there. So can we define social enterprise? Social enterprise isn't a legal structure within itself. It's actually a way of doing business. There's no way you can register as a social enterprise, but what you can do is demonstrate you're a social enterprise through the work that you do. So social enterprises are what we call mission-led. They have a social purpose and they want to do something good for a community or section of the community, or on a larger scale, society, or create impact and change globally. Social entrepreneurs are very passionate about their cause. So they have a social issue, or they take a social issue, take a social concern, and that is at the forefront of what they do. They actually operate as a business. So social enterprises aren't charities. They can access grant funding, but they typically have a product or service that they sell as a business to reach their social goals. Social enterprises typically reinvest their profits back into the business to achieve their social impact, rather than diverting profit out of the business to shareholders for private gain. So the money that they make after paying staff and after paying overheads and so on is returned to the business to help them reach their social mission. Measuring impact is really important. So it's not just saying you are creating good and doing good, it's actually demonstrating that you're doing that through measuring the difference that you're making, and then communicating that so that your stakeholders are able to understand what you're doing and how you're doing it. In terms of the legal structure, I said a bit earlier that social enterprises aren't a legal structure within themselves. There's different models, which I'll talk about a bit further on in the presentation, and different legal structures that you can adopt to incorporate as a social enterprise and solidify the business model kind of in law, so that it's not for profit. So in terms of where they fit, you can see here we have a sliding scale. On the left hand side we have the traditional charity model, and then on the right hand side we have the traditional business, and then there's a few different kind of hybrid models that sit in between social enterprises and those business and charity models on the edge there. So social enterprises take or borrow elements of charity and elements of traditional business and bring them together. So they kind of merge those two models together in one. So charities on the left-hand side tend to typically, although they can trade and they do trade, access a lot of their funding from grants and from charitable giving, so donations, fundraising, sponsorship, that sort of thing. Typically, traditional businesses are purely profit-driven organisations that don't tend to rely on grant funding or can't access grant funding, and that typically make their money through sale of a product, sale of a service. Social enterprises take both those elements and kind of fuse them together. So they sell a product, they sell a service, they can also access some grant funding, and they have a mission and create social value in the way that a charity does. There's other different types of businesses, kind of hybrid businesses, if you like, that sit on that continuum as well. So we're seeing more and more businesses kind of straddling the social enterprise and traditional business model. They might be known as what's called a B Corp. I'm not sure if anyone's heard of a B Corp, but that's a kind of hybrid approach for a mission-led business that perhaps is still quite corporate and that is more commercially orientated. So businesses that maybe have a social mission but still operate using commercial principles sit inside and sit in between that kind of social enterprise and traditional business space. So typically, to be a social enterprise, as I said, you must trade, and at least 50% of the turnover profits of the organisation must come through trade. There's no one vetting that, so it's not a legal requirement in any shape or form. It's a benchmark, really, that social enterprises should really kind of aspire to, that they should generate at least 50% of their income through trade, through selling a product or selling a service. Now, depending on the social enterprise's legal structure, as I said, they should also be able to access some grant funding, maybe to kind of pilot projects, to run programs, to create social impact. But that grant funding and those grant funded projects aren't the be all and end all. So they're not the kind of main income stream of the organisation. Whereas with a charity, a voluntary organisation, a community organisation, typically that will provide the majority of income. So social enterprises are often said to be working to achieve what we call the 3 Ps, the common principles of social enterprise, which are people, profit and planet. So put all those together to create a sustainable business. So people, obviously, we have the benefit to communities. Profit, social enterprises must make profit in order to create the benefit with its communities. And social enterprises as well should also consider the environment and how they may be more sustainable environmentally and how they may reduce their negative impact upon the environment. Okay, what is a social enterprise not? So we're kind of flipping it on its head a little bit here. What isn't a social enterprise? You can see from the pictures there, social enterprises aren't charities. So whereas they can ask for donations and they can kind of ask for sponsorship, that is something that is seen as sort of secondary to what they do, and the main focus of their business should be on trade. So social enterprises are different in that they are more enterprising perhaps, and they actually sell a product, sell a service rather than rely upon funding. There's different types of social enterprise business models that you can be thinking about if you're thinking about sustainability of your existing organisation. There's different kind of ways in which you can operate a social enterprise or run a social enterprise, depending upon your existing services. You might create social impact directly through the services that you deliver. So an example of this might be a counselling business, for instance, that directly works with people that have mental ill health, and that through that directly generates social impact and social value. Another model is called a buy one, give one model. So this is through income generated. So this is kind of a more of a commercial model. So you may have a product In the example that I've given here, the product or the product may be socks. So you have a product and you sell that product to a consumer, and you might charge a premium for that product, and then in addition to that, you are giving away a product to somebody that needs it. So an example that we have is a social enterprise called Stand for Socks, and what they do is they sell socks. You buy a pair of socks with them, and then a pair of socks is donated to a homeless person. So it's a really good way of creating social impact, but also doing that through business rather than doing that in a way that is charitable. So that's kind of one model that's very product-based. Another way is through profit donation. So this is really quite a commercial-orientated model. An example that I can talk about is Blue Water. So it's whereby you may have a product that you sell, and then that profit from the sale of that product is donated to your charity or to your community group in order to create impact. With this example here, Blue Water, they sell very high the kind of quality bottled water, which is sold in hotels, sold in restaurants, quite high-end establishments, and then through the sale of that water, they donate profits to WaterAid, the charity. So you can see there's some kind of connection in terms of the product, but the product itself doesn't create the social value. Kind of a bottle of water doesn't necessarily give social value, but the profits that they make from the sale of that water is then used in a good way to benefit a charity and support a charity to reach their own charitable objectives. Another way that a social enterprise works could be as a social firm, and this is based on an employment model. So a lot of charities, or some charities, may set up, for instance, a social enterprise trading arm that employs their service users. It gives those people access to employment, it gives people skills training, it gives people a real living wage, and it also creates social value through providing opportunities around employment for service users. An example here, it's a local example, is a social enterprise chain of coffee shops. So a local charity, which is called Aquarius, which is a drug and alcohol charity supporting young people. In this example, has set up a chain of coffee shops in Birmingham. You wouldn't know the coffee shop was necessarily a social enterprise. It operates as any other coffee shop would, but it employs its service users, it employs young people that perhaps otherwise might struggle to get employment. It trains up young people to be baristas, it gives them customer service skills and training and so on. It supports their young people into employment. At the same time, it income generates and it makes money, and that profit is then reinvested or donated to the charity through a profit donation model. So there's different ways and different types of doing business as a social enterprise. The route that you choose will depend very much on the organisation that you currently operate. It will also depend upon levels of risk, and how much risk perhaps your board may be prepared to take. And it also depends upon the market, kind of needs of your market, and that kind of the research that you do around whether or not there's a need for the product or service that you're developing. Examples there, if you want to go away and do a little bit more further research, I talked about the buy one, give one model, Stand for Socks. And there's another example, Harry Specter's, which is kind of a high-end chocolatiers. So again, it creates employment. In this instance, it employs people that have autism, and it generates income through the sale of chocolate. So you can see that they're both using business in a way that is for good. Okay, in terms of legal structures for social enterprises, we've touched briefly upon this. Social enterprise, as I said, isn't a legal structure within itself. There's no way you can register as a social enterprise. So what you need to do is adopt legal structures that already exist. Typically, social enterprises choose a CIC model, which is a community interest company, sometimes known as a KIC. Now, there's two different types of KIC. This is where it gets a little bit more complicated. There's CICs or KICs limited by guarantee, and there's CICs or KICs limited by share. Typically, social enterprises are limited by guarantee, although we are seeing the share model increasing in popularity. The difference being is that a guarantee company doesn't have shareholders. It doesn't have individuals that have bought shares in the company, whereas a CIC limited by share will be owned by individuals who have stakes, have shares in the company, who will receive a return on their investment based on the profit that's made. Now, in order to allow that for that to be allowed as a social enterprise, the return or on the shareholding is capped. So I think it's like only 40% of overall profits is able to go out to shareholders, whereas with a typical non-CIC share company, 100% of profits will go out to shareholders. So most CICs will go down the limited by guarantee route. The reason for that being is that it is a well-known and well-established model for social enterprise. It's something that's recognised by quite a lot of grant funders as well. So typically with a CIC limited by guarantee, you can apply for grant funding from most, not all, but most of the kind of major funders and major charitable trust funds. Perhaps smaller, more traditional trust funds you might struggle with because they will tend to focus solely on charities, but you kind of big lottery, children in need, all your kind of larger funders, Esme Fairburn and so on, will recognise the CIC limited by guarantee and will fund a CIC limited by guarantee, so you can have that mixed income stream. Some social enterprises go down the limited by guarantee company route. Again, that's absolutely fine. What you need to do in that instance is make sure that you have non-profit distributing clauses built into your governing documents. So within your articles of association, you may have a statement that says, you are not for personal profit. You're likely to have your object clauses in there, and you will have something called an asset lock built into your governing documents. Similar to a charity, which is also asset locked, that basically means that the assets of the organisation aren't to be passed on or sold for profit. They're to be used to benefit your community, and they're to be passed on to another asset locked body if your company was to wind down. So they are the main legal structures that social enterprises tend to choose. So CIC limited by guarantee, or CIC guarantee, or a typical company limited by guarantee, with changes made to the articles of association to ensure it meets the requirements of being a social enterprise. In terms of kind of where to go next, social enterprises always come from a place of passion, so they always come from a place of change. So what is it that you're wanting to change? Where is your passion? What difference do you want to make within your community, within society? Perhaps it's improving access to education, perhaps it's supporting young people with mental health, perhaps it's working with older people to improve their physical and mental well-being. Perhaps it's reducing social isolation amongst older people. So what is it that you want to change? Where is the difference that you want to make? And then how can you create a business model around that? So what can you sell, either directly or indirectly, to create and generate income? that you can then use to plough into your organisation to create that social change. So is there a product? Is there something that you could sell to a customer, whether that's the same kind of customer group as the group you're wanting to make impact with, or whether that's the general public, you know, whether that's a completely different customer group, but you're using the profits to create good. So what's the business model? Your resources, what do you need? You know, what staffing do you need? What people do you need? What equipment might you need? Do you need to invest? Have you got startup costs? Where will that come from? It might be that you can pilot a project as an existing organisation. So the National Lottery Awards for All, for instance, are quite good around funding pilots. So if you're an existing charity, you want to pilot an idea for a social enterprise, it might be possible for you to get a small grant to allow you to test your idea, perhaps build your market, and do some research around maybe market need, to try and understand whether or not your social enterprise idea is going to be viable. So what resources do you need? What do you need to get things going? Do you need kind of more staff? Do you need a focus group? What do you need around you to help you build your social enterprise and move things forward? So your structure, do you need to start a new company, or do you need to convert an existing business into a social enterprise or legal structure? Typically charities tend to be quite risk adverse. So starting a kind of new business as a charity may be seen as quite risky. Sometimes to avoid that risk and avoid that potential impact to the charity, a separate company may be set up and that stand alone, that takes that risk and stands at arm's length to the charity. So there's that separation between the charity and the company. And in order to cement the relationship, it might be that you have a few board members on the company from the charity, but you also have some independent board members to make sure that it's operating in a way that's fair and without conflict. So your partners, it's quite difficult to do this alone. Who do you need to get involved from the start? So are there organisations that are working with in your sphere that you need to be working with, that you need to be reaching out and contacting? It's really important that you build that network around you and you have those partners to support you. Looking at your income generation model as a social enterprise is really important. So what can you do to make income? If you are solely going to be relying on grants and donations, it's not going to work as a social enterprise. Foremost is your income generation. Where are those opportunities? Is there a market? Is there a need? Can you sell a product? Can you sell a service to the market? And are there opportunities for growth there as well? Social impact. So social impact is all about reporting on and measuring the difference that you are making. Can your project or can your social enterprise create the impact that you need it to? And how can you max out that impact? How can you create more impact through what you do? Your marketing and communications obviously is crucial for any business, whether that's startup or at growth stage. How can you place your impact story at the heart of what you do? And how can you use your marketing and storytelling to communicate to people about the good that you're creating through your social enterprise? Because ultimately it's that's going to get buy-in, and it's the social impact story that's going to speak to your customers and encourage them to buy from you and do business with you. So ensuring that your impact story is at the heart of what you do from the start is really important. It's also important that you involve your community of benefit, and that the people you want to benefit and the people that you want to help are represented within your organisation. It might be that you have somebody involved in your kind of task force or steering group, or you may have your community represented at board level, for instance. But it's really important that your service users or your community is built into your business model, and you're able to get their input, get their kind of feedback, and that they're represented through the work that you do. That's kind of me, a bit of a whistle-stop tour of social enterprise. But that's obviously, if you have any questions, iSE will always be happy to help. We have a number of different programs for people starting social enterprises as well as existing social enterprises. So please check out our website. My details are on the first slide. Send me an email. I'm very happy to help where I can and offer support where I can. Thank you very much.